an article dropped this week from the propaganda machine, the New York Times, regarding Bitcoin mining. And we all knew they were working on it. And we all knew what it was going to be about. And we were all skeptical about what the output would be. I had a tinge of hope that they would have made an attempt with some real journalism and spoken to both sides and written a balanced article, and they didn't. It's an embarrassing piece of shit, and it really pisses me off. And so we talked about approaching this, and Danny said, let's get Lane on it, because we covered some of the similar stuff with Nick last time we spoke. And I do want to attack this article, and I do want to attack the New York Times, and I do want to call out the journalist who did this, because I don't think he should be calling himself a journalist. And so I assume most people listening will know of the article. If you haven't read it, please do go and read it. And yeah, let's work through it. Okay. Do you want to do a TLDR on what the article is and does?
Yeah, let me say a couple of things up front. The first is that I really try to keep an open mind when it comes to, quote unquote, mainstream media in general, and the New York Times in particular. And what I really try to do is, what is that famous line? Never chalk up to malice what can be explained through ignorance or incompetence.
Yeah.
And I kind of try to give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of assume, that it's more ignorance than malice. But, so I read the article the first time and maybe the second time with that frame of mind, and then just completely failed, because as we'll get into here, it really feels malicious in some ways. I mean, even starting with the hero image, the banner image, the lead, I think they call it, right, in journalism, which, as you guys have seen, right, there's been some questions around whether this particular image, which shows a Bitcoin mining operation in Texas, I forget the name of the town it's in. It's one of the large ones.
The Rockdale one.
I think so. Yeah. It's the largest one, I think, right? With this cloud of haze around it, right? Whether the image is doctored and making the point that it's only hazy, a handful of days out of the year in Texas, and why was this image chosen? Was it modified? All this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of that throughout this article, which is very frustrating. It's very disappointing for a bunch of reasons, but I think the biggest reason is that it, we're living in this age, obviously, of, it's certainly in the United States, but I'm sure here to some extent as well, of polarization, political polarization. And all this article serves to do is force you to one side or the other, right? Either you kind of go into this skeptical about Bitcoin, or maybe not knowing much about it, and come out of it feeling very strongly that Bitcoin is evil and Bitcoin miners are evil and they're literally killing people, right? So we'll talk about that in a sec as well, because that's the way the article starts. Or you're on our side of the aisle, so to speak, and you roll your eyes and you're like, this is biased and the New York Times is a fucking joke.
But they're almost...
It's very frustrating.
If you're on that side, you're almost on the side of alt-right conspiracy theorist group of people.
Right.
Whereas if you're on the side of them, you're on the side of the compassionate, progressive side, which makes me very thankful we have people like yourself, Margot Paez, Trey Walsh, Jason Meyer, a group of people who traditionally probably weren't, I shouldn't answer for them, but I would assume maybe New York Times readers, certainly on the progressive side.
This is me, by
your
the way.
target market, right?
This is me. I grew up reading the New York Times and putting it on something of a pedestal. Definitely considered myself liberal, in the American sense of the word, a few years ago, and have been on this kind of political, journey over the past few years with Bitcoiners among others. Just find myself feeling very politically homeless lately as a result of, a bunch of factors, but this is one of them, right? The complete and absolute and utter failure of the mainstream media to present, kind of thoughtful journalism that covers both sides of the story. Where do we get our news? This is a whole separate topic. You've covered it before. You had a good,
just roll, man. We got time.
Episode recently on it. Reddit, Twitter, seriously, news is important. I read The Economist. That's how do I put it? It's pretty good, but it's consistently, it has its bias, but it's kind of wears its bias on a sleeve, so to speak. You kind of know where they're coming from. I like the fact that it's a weekly thing, so you're not getting the same kind of frenetic stuff that you get from something like the New York Times. But it's genuinely a crisis. We're in this crisis of media
and governance.
Yeah, but it's even deeper than that, right? It's we like, how do we know what's real? How do we know what's true? How do we know what's going on in the world? I don't know the answer to that question anymore. Like, we're just questioning the most basic things. And I legitimately don't know like where to turn to know the truth unless I've, observed it myself. And I think that's a huge social issue.
Yeah. And I think I kind of have a picture of what I think is going on in that pre-internet, there wasn't very many news sources. When I grew up, there were 3 or 4 TV channels.
Same in the States, yeah.
The news was on, once or twice a day. There was like a 6 o'clock news and a 10 o'clock news. And it wasn't really commercialized in the way it is now. There were a number of newspapers, and you kind of read the newspaper, which was from your cohort of people.
Right.
And then the political debates happened from distance. You got your updates, and you just got on and lived your life.
Right.
And so I suspect everything that was happening now was happening previously.
Right.
It was just easy to get away with it. The corruption was hidden.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that the internet has had a lot of deep foundational impacts on human society. But one of the biggest ones is just, frankly, revealing bullshit. Like, we're all aware, like you said, it was this way before. We have always been lied to by the powers that be, whether it's, governments, large companies, media organizations, et cetera. We now know that we're being lied to. And when someone lies, we find out more or less immediately because of the internet.
But what I think is going on now is, and this is where I'm really trying to pick my words carefully, because I'm always trying to do an important job of bringing normies into this world, not just to learn about Bitcoin, but to learn about Bitcoin, politics, news, media, truth, all this stuff, just so people have a better picture of the world. And I'm always trying to word it in a way where I don't sound like a nutter. I don't want to sound like I'm Alex Jones.
Of course, what did you say recently? Your Facebook friends think you're Alex Jones, and your Bitcoin friend think you're a status cup,
no,
right?
No, my American friends think I'm a crazy Liverpool, and my British friends think I'm Alex Jones. It's my pin tweet. I leave it up there now. It'll probably stay there forever. But I'm always trying to do it because I don't want to scare people off. When I present a CBDC and I try and explain how these will be used in China, and that may come here, it's a big leap for people who haven't seen behind the veil of what's going on.
Yeah. So Behind the Veil, that's a good name. I feel like there should be a podcast with that name.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
That's Craig Warmke's article, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's a great name. It's a good brand.
So
I'm going to use it if you don't.
We're going to use it.
Register that domain name quickly.
BehindTheVeil.com.
It's really good. It's really good.
But I'm always trying to do it in the best way I can. And the way I'm trying to picture what's going on now is that this kind of internet technology era means we're all closer to the truth.
Right.
We can smell and see bullshit. We're told it sooner. And so I feel like the elite's control of what we have, which is the political class, the super successful corporations, the media. That's
what Curtis Yarvin calls the cathedral. I think it's a good all-encompassing term.
Right. So that cathedral, their control over the narrative, discourse, society, economy, I think it's starting to fragment.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we've got this, I see 2 battles. There's one battle where they're pitching us against each other, but there's really one battle of us and them. Yeah. And I'm more in for the us v them now. The choking of Bitcoin right now is because the dollar is collapsing, so they don't want people to exit to that. I see something like Substack as a really positive move towards better information.
Definitely.
You're seeing, Elon Musk has essentially attacked that this week.
Unbelievable. We should talk about that too. It blew my mind.
Yeah, but that is, again, he's like got one foot in their camp and one foot in ours.
Yeah.
One time he's doing a deal with China, and the other time he's telling us for free speech. But that control is starting to fragment, and I think that's the battle of our time. Is that it's the us v them now. It's not the left v right. That's just all a fake game.
It's what they want you to believe.
It's what they want you to believe. So that's what I think's going on now. That's what I think's happening, Lane. So I really don't understand who is behind the New York Times, what their motivation is, what they're trying to do. But what I do know is they are now liars who are, I knew for a long time, but they're now...
I don't think that's new.
Yeah, but it's like very clear to me because they're in my world now that they're liars and they're disseminating propaganda. By the way, did you see the Noam Chomsky article from 2015? That came up this week. Have you got it, Danny? So Noam Chomsky, the New York Times is pure propaganda. I'm not going to read it all. A front page article was devoted to a flawed story about a campus rape in the journal Rolling Stone, exposed in the leading academic journal of the media critique. So fears the departure from journalistic integrity. It is also the subject of Lee's story in the business section, with a full inside page devoted to the continuation of the 2 reports, blah, 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 blah. So basically, and his refreshing commitment to the Times to the integrity of journalism basically goes on to explain issues with the New York Times. And I think that is it now. I mean, I personally am declaring a personal war on the New York Times because it's a propaganda machine.
No, I mean, I agree. And just to reiterate the point I made a little earlier, it's sad. Like, really, this is what I feel is sadness, because the New York Times is a brand that I grew up with and did have some degree of trust for.
Do you feel you might have always been lied to them? By them?
By them, yeah, I think so. But, I think it's just become more blatant recently, more obvious. I'll tell you, when I first started to lose faith in the New York Times, I actually do remember this moment. It was the Trump election.
Right.
The first, the one where he was elected, right? So going into 2016. And it was specifically, like, I think actually that you could make a strong case that the New York Times created Donald Trump the president, right? With the incessant coverage, of his campaign, and in particular, the negative way in which they portrayed Hillary Clinton, like the fact that they put her bloody emails on, the front page multiple times or something. That was very sad to see. And, you could kind of chalk that up and again, be generous, right? And kind of say, well, there was a political moment and, they had no idea that he had any real chance of being elected, blah, blah, blah. But really, yeah, that's what's so frustrating to me about this and some other stuff that's come out recently. Like, basically all the coverage in the Times of Bitcoin, to the extent that there has been coverage, has been negative. And I've never seen an article or even an opinion piece. I guess there's been a couple, some Bitcoiners have managed to get things in the opinion column here and there. But it's just overwhelmingly negative. And it really makes you wonder, like, what's the source of the bias and do they have an agenda? And I mean, I'm not by any means a conspiracy theorist, and I tend to think that there's like much simpler explanations for a lot of this stuff, but it just makes me sad. It really genuinely makes me sad.
What, perhaps they're just pandering to the audience because they know what the audience wants.
Yeah, maybe that's more like
this.
The explanation, but that doesn't excuse the behavior, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. You know what? Just to give a note, that a similar article, not as bad, but there was a similar, very negative article about Bitcoin from The Spectator. And that's
a UK publication.
Yeah,
right?
It's a UK publication. I tagged in the tweets. I think it was either the editor or the journalist who wrote it and said, like, you're fundamentally wrong, blah blah blah. And they said, feel free to write a response, and I did. And they published it almost unedited. They made a few edits with regards to kind of structure and grammar, which were changes I accepted because it improved the article.
Yeah.
But they were open to it. I've tried similar things. I tried it once with the FT. They edited my article so many times they made it pointless, so that was a waste of time. And I've tried to reach out to is it Alex Hearn at The Guardian?
Yeah.
He just will not enter a dialogue. He's made his decision. I am anti-Bitcoin. And those people, to me, are just not journalists. Right. If you're a journalist...
Right. You're not willing to engage or like cover the other side of the story.
Exactly. And look, I'm not saying I am the most knowledgeable Bitcoin. I think it's openly known that. Yeah. But when the guy with the biggest podcast reaches out to you and said, listen, I think you've got something wrong here. Here's a list of things I can help you. And for you to completely ignore that, you're not a journalist. So when these people call themselves journalists, they're lying. They're not journalists. They're propagandists.
Yeah, no, I think I agree.